Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing. It is Monday, December the 2nd. Myself and Chris Jack here. Derek Clark is off today, so we will see you through your Monday show. We have an entertaining game to talk about, Chris, do we? Kind of, not really, but at least our Rangers victory to dissect. How are you getting on first, Chris? You made it back safely from Nice last week.
I did, made it back safe and sound. Travel-wise, it was actually okay. As you well know, sometimes these travel things can not go overly smoothly. But I was out and back via Heathrow on Tuesday and Friday. Everything went smoothly. And of course, Thursday night was whatever Thursday night was. Still not really sure how Thursday night unfolded, but it did. But that was a good trip. Managed to get a trip up to Monaco on Thursday morning before the game. Me and a couple of boys went for a bit of sightseeing, so nice to get back up there and see some of the sights. And then obviously game, and then back home very early on Friday morning, half 7 flight I think it was out of Nice on Friday morning. But I got back home safe and sound, and could then endure whatever Sunday was.
Yeah, it was a kind of quintessential Rangers week, wasn't it? I guess an optimistic view is Rangers get this impressive victory away in Nice. And yes, Nice, they did, after it went 4-0, they chucked it, but Rangers went 4-0 up. You can't, you can't really criticise that. They hadn't been beaten at home over the course of that season, but very much what you come to expect from Rangers in European competition. Obviously, the day after, the week where Clement kind of defied the notion that his game model was better suited to European competition than domestic competition. Kind of a week of, I said on the podcast, my own podcast yesterday, Chris, without you after the game, I said it was kind of felt like a status quo week where the margin of victory in the Scottish Premiership, we're going to come on to discuss that today, continues to be pretty slight. I think I've got the results here in front of me, so I'll scan it quickly, but I think it's only twice Rangers have won a game in the Premiership by more than a one-goal margin, and that was a 2-0 win over St Johnstone. I think that was their last game at Hampden, or one of their last games at Hampden, where Ross McCausland came off the bench and scored late on. Cyril Dessers scored that goal, kind of controversial goal that day, and the 6-0 win against Ross County. So goals continued to evade Rangers. They're still scoring at that kind of rate, which will see them score under 60 goals over the course of the season, which is nowhere near where they'd want to be. But in European competition, that doesn't seem to be an issue. And it is a quite incredible stat, Chris, that they have scored as many goals away from home in the Scottish Premiership as they have in that first half against Nice at the Allianz Riviera. I mean, that it kind of makes your point for you, doesn't it?
If there was ever a stat that summed up Rangers season, I think that's probably it. But was it Ali McCoist that came up with that one on TNT the other night? And that sums up almost how the real Jekyll and Hyde nature of this Rangers side. They play European games, they look accomplished, they create chances, they score goals like we saw on Thursday night, like we saw against Bucharest. That night in Malmo, created a lot of goals, or a lot of chances. Sorry, should have scored more goals. Yeah. But then domestically, as you say, they almost revert to type, and it's slower, it's more pedestrian, there's less spark about them, there's less creativity. I know the manager mentioned post-match that they come up against a really good goalkeeper, and you have to give credit. Some good saves were made, but you're still looking for a bit more from Rangers. And I think it's always interesting. You look at the comments from the manager post-match. You look at as we were waiting on the press conference starting, you get a chance to scroll through social media and see what the fans are saying, see what the general mood is, and you almost get a feel for that mood. The manager then comes in, and his mood is not quite the same as the fans' mood, and then the fans then react to the press conference mood, and it's very different from what the manager just said as well. And I think you almost get in this situation of, well, what is the real thing? I think you also have to judge that with your own eyes. And I wasn't overly impressed once again by Rangers yesterday. It was as expected. We spoke about it on the shows last week. Would have no surprise if Rangers were really impressive in Nice. Not to that extent, right enough, but we would have had no surprise if Rangers were good in Nice on Thursday, and then come back and not really at it domestically, and that's how it panned out. You're now looking ahead to another week, to another two difficult opponents. First one at Ibrox against Kelly. Who knows what the Ibrox crowd is going to be? It's going to be like, especially if Rangers don't start well. And then obviously back up to Dingwall, one of the scenes of the crimes of last season.
Very much so. Very much so, yeah. I think it was almost the scene of the crime that day, but we won't go over that again. Clement, speaking about the game, Chris, we'll get to that first. We'll talk about the performance, talk about that, the continuing lack of goals. What do the numbers say about it? We'll have more on the website about it today. We'll talk about Ianis Hagi, talk about Robin Proper as well. Clement said, thought it was a good performance. The only thing we missed is to score a second, third or fourth goal to finish off the game earlier and kill the belief of the opponent. We did that well against Nice, but we also have to say it was a really good goalkeeper on the other side. It's a little bit annoying from my side. There's a few weeks that I've had to repeat that, but it's part of football that apparently goalkeepers against us, they play the game of their season, and that was the case because a few really good finishes and actions, but the goalkeeper kept his team in the game. At the other end, it's crucial to not concede chances, so we have for the second time in a row only one shot on target from the opponent. I think, Chris, that so if I pull up the trend line from yesterday, in isolation, I'll take away the banner so people can see it. In isolation, this was a comfortable game for Rangers. They didn't create an abundance of chances, because although the XG is 1.71 to 0.15, Danilo had a pretty good chance late on, which took that up from about 1.3. So it's still that kind of quite a slim margin, and you can see throughout the game there's not an abundance of high quality opportunities. Now, they did limit St Johnstone to not many opportunities. St Johnstone tried to play to their credit. They're trying to do something new under their manager, which is quite refreshing to see in Scotland. So Rangers were in control and they were comfortable, Chris. But I guess that's the type of game you can have every once in a while. And the criticism would be that this is a game that we see from Rangers every week, really, domestically. And the numbers back that up, don't they? It's December and they've only won twice by more than a one-goal margin. So this comment here from, I've got it started from, if I can find it, from Stephen, just the normal under Clement, to defensively pedestrian the league. I agree that it's kind of the normal. I don't know if it's that he's trying to be defensive per se. I just don't think Rangers quite have the tools to break teams down and create high quality chances when there isn't space. That's the old European argument again. So do you think that's fair, that in isolation yesterday, Rangers didn't look like they were going to drop points, but if you win games by those narrow margins consistently, you are going to drop points last weekend against Dundee United at Ibrox?
I think if you have to pull up a trend line for a number, you could pick a couple of games at random over the course of the season. It's going to be the same type of numbers. It's going to give you the same vibe of how Rangers have got through games. They are getting through games, but they're not dominating games in terms of goals.
Yeah.
And the danger is when you are that tight in terms of the goals scored and the chances that you give up. So yes, you can say, well, Rangers had a number of chances. Goalkeeper made a number of saves. Rangers should have won more comfortably, and St Johnstone didn't really cause Rangers that many problems. But if you're only scoring one, and also as a Jason Holt own goal in the end, if you're only getting one, it only takes one mistake at the other end for the whole thing to then come crashing down round about your ears. And that's that fine margin. That's that 50-50. That's that narrow line that Rangers are walking far too often. You mentioned there, you can get away with it every so often. So if you were going to Pittodrie and you win 1-0, you would say that's a good battling performance. It's the mark of champions. Yeah. It's all the usual stuff that you could put at a result performance like that. But it's not, because that's how I've seen Rangers perform at Ibrox. That's how they're getting through most away games. And you cannot leave. Eventually, that catches up with you. It seems daft to say they've got away with it so far when they are so far adrift in terms of title race. They've not got away with it in that sense. But it could have been even worse, because it only takes, say, one mistake, or a corner that somebody doesn't mark their man, or a throw-in that someone doesn't deal with properly. These are the fine margins that Rangers are leaving themselves open to, because they don't go and kill teams off. They don't look like being 2-0 up, where they can then say, right, actually, the job's done, we can now go and see out the rest of the game. They're going into too many matches the last 5, 10, 15 minutes. And people are like, well, what happens if? Rangers shouldn't be in that position. They should be able to go and see teams out in a far more comfortable manner than they have been.
Yeah, I mean, Alan saying goal difference isn't going to matter at 3 points, and Rangers obviously do cut the gap to Aberdeen to 6 points now, I think, Chris, after they drop points away at Hearts. And James here saying slight improvement, but when we have a chance, why shoot straight at the goalkeeper? I think that point you make there is a really good one, Chris, because if I read out the games that Rangers have won this season, 2-1 at home against Motherwell, they were actually pretty good that day, probably did merit a third goal. But even then, as you say, the game was kind of precariously on a couple of long throw-ins, and you leave yourself in that situation. 1-0 away against Dundee United. Maybe Dundee United again didn't have that many opportunities, but game still felt very openly on to potentially drop points. 1-0 at home against Hibs. I think Hibs were unfortunate to not get a point. 2-0 at home against St Johnstone. That wasn't a game. McCausland scored against St Johnstone in the League Cup, sorry. 2-0 against St Johnstone was a little bit more comfortable, but again, if memory serves me correctly, they had a chance late on where they should have taken the game to 2-1, so it wasn't exactly completely dominant. 2-1 at home against St Mirren, 1-0 at home against Hearts, 1-0 away against St Johnstone. So I guess that while Clement would probably justifiably say, well, look at in isolation yesterday, probably maybe it should have been 2-0, and you're coming off the back of a European game. But I guess to maybe repeat a point I made 2 minutes ago, Chris, that is this pattern that they aren't scoring enough goals. Now, Rangers have underperformed their XG by about 3 goals away from home. Quite a lot of that was in games against Kilmarnock and Aberdeen. But yeah, I guess it does feel more of the same, where we've just seen this quite a lot over the course of the last year now. I think against Dundee United, Rangers could point to a goalkeeper having a really good performance. But aside from that, it's not as if they're consistently only scoring 1 goal and creating 3 expected goals. Do you know what I mean? So I think it is fair to call it a pattern that they're in at the moment.
And I think the manager, he touched on this last Wednesday when he was asked about this difference between domestic and European, and he's mentioned it a couple of times. I think he mentioned it yesterday in terms of getting players back. So you look at the 3 main attacking ones in terms of who's still to come into the side or to come back into the squad. Tom Lawrence, obviously, Matondo and Cortez. Out of those 3, how many make a massive difference to this Rangers side? I'm not really convinced. I think we know
Cortez. I think if he's fit, but
Cortez good, but it's if he's fit, and do we still know if he can do it over a longer term? I think we can all but write off Matondo being that longer term option, because 1, he's not fit for long term, and 2, he never performs for long term. It's all short, sharp bursts from Matondo in terms of fitness and form. Lawrence, I think we know about, and there's also other alternatives at that in that playmaker role. So Lawrence is not going to be a case of he's back, everything's going to be fine. Cortez could make a big difference. Matondo probably won't make a big difference. So what Rangers have got is what they've got until you get to January. Let's not talk about January, because there's still a lot of football to be played, and we'll talk a lot about the window, during it. But it's not as if a case of you say, well, once he's back, it's going to make such a massive difference to how Rangers perform. It's not really, because what you see is what you get right now with Rangers. And as we've just discussed, what you get, it's not a lot, and it's not really good, and not really good enough.
Yeah, let's talk about a positive. Ianis Hagi, who was the man of the match in not a big pool of contenders, it must be said, but he came in for his first start, Chris, since May 2023 for Rangers. Alan saying Hagi was a breath of fresh air. Gordon, Hagi in the number 10 made Rangers less predictable. I agree with that. Far from a good performance, but I felt that helped. A lot of love for Hagi in the comments. Robert saying that really good movement and found himself in space time and time again. There were positives, just not enough. Derek, to be fair, Hagi does look sharp and has vision. It's just around the guys around him who don't. I think that comment, agree with kind of all of them, that it wasn't as if Hagi came in and dropped a 9 out of 10 performance, Chris, but he raised the levels of those around him and took risks. It was the speed that he played that ball for the winning goal that, it's not the best pass in the game, but it's just doing something instinctive rather than always trying to play the safe option or play around. And we've spoken to death about will he improve this team. I don't think he's going to be the guy who turns Rangers season around single-handedly, but that's what stood out to me. I thought he improved players around him, and he made that system look a little bit more creative, gave a little bit more balance to the midfield. Do you tend to go along with that kind of theory?
Also, can't be lost that Hagi was someone who, at the start of the season, Clement didn't show a huge willingness to try and resolve that contact issue. Once it became clear, I think, was it actually in Malmo that you asked him about Hagi, or was it in Lublin?
I think initially, so I think the timeline was. So to recap, the timeline was there was this contract standoff over summer. Looked quite possible that Hagi would leave the club. The maybe external pressure from Clement and say press conferences came when he was asked about it. I believe the Dynamo Kyiv game was when he said that he was. I can't remember the exact phrase, but essentially he was free to leave the club. After Hagi did not get a transfer in the summer, and I think it's important to stress probably it was on both sides. There's two sides to that story, but then there was a desire from both sides to resolve it and make it work. And there's no value in a player who's Rangers' best player yesterday being in the B team as he was at the start of this season. And actually, I thought, Chris, that Clement has used lots of different number 10s last season to this season. Maybe that's slightly different, the configuration of that midfield. We'll speak about Nadim Bayrami because he's probably a bit frustrated that he's still not getting to play in his favourite position. But we know what Hagi can do, and I thought yesterday he helped Rangers build up a bit. He played, a few of his passes didn't come off, but it was just that aspect of improving players around him. And we've seen Diamande and Raskin and Barron as a domestic midfield. It might work in Europe. It's not got enough to be really black and white about it. There's not enough creative profiles, even if you look at the numbers, to justify, I think, playing that midfield three consistently in league matches where Rangers are going to have a lot of the ball.
I think it's, as Ricky touched on there, it's just a shame that this Hagi situation wasn't resolved sooner, because it's always, even since he came back into the squad, it's been a bit stop-start. Obviously, European games don't help him get into any of a flow because he's not in the squad, because it wasn't resolved in time for him to be in the squad. Also had the red card against St Johnstone that then cost him a couple of games. So it almost feels like it's just in the last couple of weeks, the last couple of fixtures, that he's actually been able to show something. And it's just a shame that we're now early December and that's the situation. But ultimately, it is what it is, and Rangers then just have to try and make the most of it. I think you could see a real determination from Hagi yesterday for him to make the most of it. He's clearly, I think he's a guy who gets it at Rangers. He mentioned that in his club media interview that he did a couple of weeks ago. He knows what it takes to be successful here. He's been part of good Rangers sides here. He's not going to be, I think, as I've discussed it many times over the last few weeks, he's not going to be the one guy that comes in and it's all going to be fine. There are other issues within this Rangers side, but is he an upgrade on what has been there for the first couple of months of the season? I think so. Is he going to start every single game? Probably not. Will he have bad games? Of course he will, because that's just the type of player that he is. But he has the ability to try something different. He has the ability to break open these packed defences, has the ability to score goals. He's also still waiting on that one. But he offers something different that other players in that squad don't. And so I think it's quite telling that they've now got to this stage and the manager's thought, I've got no other options. I need to go and try Hagi in that position. I don't think it was a case of like a bowing to like fan pressure or anything like that. There's obviously been a lot of talk about Hagi, a lot of talk about Agaman. I don't think he's like bowing down to that fan pressure. I think it's just a realisation of things are not going well. I need to try and find some way to change it. It worked with Agaman during the week. It worked with Hagi to an extent yesterday. And these guys are now hopefully in more of a rhythm because they do have a part to play, and they must have a part to play, because what's been before them, it's not been good enough. So you're looking for these guys now to really go and kick on.
Yeah, and what you say about Clement realising they needed to make changes, I can really remember a situation where he's made 3 subs by 55, 56 minutes and keeping Igaman and Danilo on the pitch yesterday. I think that was reflective of the fact that Rangers and he badly needed those 3 points yesterday. Robert saying Hagi's intent was the difference. He wanted to create and make things happen. I agree with that. We'll get to some more comments, but a few comments coming in to discuss Robin Proper and Nadim Bayrami. Chris, I'll start with Bayrami. Maka saying, do you feel Bayrami's form has dipped dramatically, hooked at half-time? Clement's kind of mentioned that, and I think this is a fair point. His final third players, Czerny and Bayrami, they're playing international football as well, and they've had to play so many minutes because there's been no options. I thought Bayrami in that first half got into positions where, I can't think off the top of my head, but there was one where it really needed a left foot pass. I think he picked up the ball in transition, couldn't get the ball forward quickly enough. I think you've seen increasingly that when Rangers don't have the ball and he can't move in field, he's not as effective trapped out by the left touch line. And he'll be looking at that Hagi performance thinking that's where I want to play. And it's, again, I think that is a theme of Clement's time at the club, where because he's moulding players to the system rather than maybe adapting week in, week out, you do have a lot of players playing out of position, and at times will suffer for that. And Robin Proper again. Charles saying Balogun should be playing as often as possible. I asked Clement about Proper after, and he reaffirmed that he had picked up a knock in the first half and was ill after Thursday night. But that's not the first time he's been taken off at halftime or taken off early in the Premiership. Chris, I know you were speaking to him in the mix zone about maybe struggling to adapt a little bit to Scottish football after the win over Nice on Thursday night, where I thought he was pretty good, all told. And in that first half yesterday, I thought he did struggle, misjudged a couple of long balls. And yes, Rangers have Leon Balogun there, but you're getting into a position where you're relying on a 36-year-old. Don't get me wrong, I think Balogun's done really well for Rangers, but he's also shown that he does have an injury record at points, and heading into December, especially without Horatio Casemiro available, who's had surgery now, will likely be missing for the full season. Clement, I think, does have a bit of a problem at centre-back.
I know I said we wouldn't talk about January, but I'm going to mention it just very briefly. Is that an area that Rangers do need to try and do some business in over the course of the window? Not just to cover for losing Casemiro, but you look at Proper. I thought it was really honest of him. As you say, I mentioned it to him in the mix zone on Thursday night. I thought it was honest of him to admit that he was maybe being caught out a wee bit in terms of what he expected from Scottish football. And I think, as he mentioned, when you sign for Rangers, it doesn't take long. You're going to know the name, you're going to know the club. It doesn't take long to do your homework and find out what life here is all about. But having that information and then being able to handle it are very different things. Better players than Robin Proper have found out that life at Rangers can be difficult. Better players than Robin Proper have found out that Scottish football can be difficult to adapt to, and for some players it just doesn't suit them. He's played all of his football in Holland. He's come through the youth system there, playing a certain way. He's played all of his first team games and been very successful at it, but played in certain teams with a certain style against opposition with a certain style. And here it just doesn't work. Sometimes it just can't translate. You think back to Sam Lammers, for example, perhaps an even better indication of that. You can have all the experience and look as good as you like in League A, but when you come to League B, it doesn't necessarily work. And Lammers has shown that either side of his stint at Rangers. Proper's not at that stage. I don't think it's quite as stark as a Lammers example, but there are issues there, and you have to say, can he be relied upon to get through the games you're looking at and building a centre half partnership? For so many seasons, it was Conor Goldson plus another. It's now John Souttar plus another. You don't really want to be chopping and changing that every so often. I say, if you think that Proper is not the man for certain domestic fixtures, you're then relying on Balogun to be fit. Can you do that every single week? Probably not. So I think that's definitely an area where Rangers do have to look at. Does Robin Proper move back on again in January? That'd be interesting. I know Johnny mentioned this on the show with me a couple of weeks ago. I think he's firmly in the just let him cut your losses and move him on after 6 months. Not convinced the club will go down that route. I think they do have to try and find another option, because it's just not quite working at centre half outside of John Souttar, who I think will have to give a bit of credit to for being consistent in terms of availability and his level of performance.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I think Suter and I think Chefty again, its final ball and moments could be better, but at 20 years old coming into this Rangers team, I think he's been really good this season. Colin saying, what about Leon King? I don't think King was actually on the bench yesterday. I could be wrong on that point, but Colin raises a great point. We've obviously made this point before, but 2.5 seasons ago, Rangers let Balogun go to create a pathway for Leon King, and it is it's very descriptive of the changes, the lack of consistency in the last few years as to where Rangers are now. And again, that's not a slight on Leon Balogun, who I think is one player who you couldn't really criticise over the last few years, but he plays in a really aggressive game that demands a lot of running, Chris. He's not going to be able to do that every 3 days, so we'll see what happens in there. A few other comments, a couple of similar points saying Cherney has had better games with Sterling or Kasem Weirjo behind him. Sterling obviously missed yesterday's game. Believe he could still be back for Wednesday's game against Kilmarnock. It's a case of seeing a specialist before then. Certainly, if you're looking ahead to the Spurs and Celtic game, believe that there's Rangers are confident he'll be fit for those games for which he will be important. Stephen saying, Joshua, can you look into when we last scored from a set piece? We did that a couple of weeks ago, Stephen. So I think it was Rangers when in the league, it was Rangers win over Kilmarnock, 4-1 win in April when Fabio Silva scored that day, who's now pulling up trees in La Liga. I see that was the last time they scored a set piece goal. They've been unfortunate from them in moments. They changed it up a little bit yesterday, but that's another topic that we've discussed before, the fact that Rangers are still without a set piece goal. Chris, what do you make, though, if I go back to the initial point, Denzel making it there as well, for me, Cherney never looks as effective playing in front of Tav, and inevitably Tav becomes the attacker, forcing Cherney to stay further back. I think it's because Tavernier is now less likely to overlap than Sterling is, and therefore Cherney has to stay wide more often. Again, like Barami on the other side, though, Cherney's had to play a lot of football, hasn't he? And I guess he will at points look a little bit less fresh as a result of that.
He will. On Tav, I think it was good to see him actually in the. I know he didn't get the goal and it came off Holt, but how many times has he actually been in that position over the course of the season? I've not seen him really advance up the pitch in that way. You spoke to him at the start of the year in La Manga, and he outlined going through some of the big goals that he's scored, and he outlined how he judges the play, how he finds himself in that position. It's not through luck. He's there because he knows how the play is going to unfold, and he knows when to make those runs to the back post. Yeah. This season, it's just not been there. He's not found himself in that position, so he'll maybe feel a bit upset that he didn't actually get the goal, because it's been a long time since he got one from open play. But it was him being in that position that allowed Rangers to get the goal. On Cherney and Bayrami, I think you have to say Cherney overall has been more effective of late. He's looked more threatening. He's also scored more goals. Bayrami, I think there's been a lot of talk of play him in number 10 and we'll see the best of him. Yes, he gets a bit of leeway for that. He gets a bit of slack for that, not playing. Cherney's also playing off the side and playing in the position that suits his game more. That's where he was signed to play. Bayrami's not, but I do think Bayrami has to start offering more. I think there's been other areas of the side that have been a bit more of a talking point. Sterling and Tav obviously been one. The midfield, centre half, number 9 obviously has been a huge talking point. That wide left berth that Bayrami has got, it's almost gone under the radar a wee bit because people have had their focus, attention kind of shifted to other parts. I think Bayrami has to start offering more though. I think when he first came in, we thought, this guy, he's got something different. He's going to provide those moments, but he's going to offer more of a threat. He's going to create chances. He's going to score goals, and he did start well here. Last couple of weeks, not really been at it. You could say he has played a lot of football, but then so is Cherney on the other side. I think Cherney is offering a lot more at present. So it's not a huge issue right now. But it could become one if Bayrami can't play himself back into form, and maybe having Matondo back and maybe having Cortez back, as much as I don't think they are ready-made, one-size-fits-all solutions to all Rangers' problems, if you can maybe give Barami a rest, maybe then allow him to move into different areas of the pitch, it might help Gay Spark a wee bit and get the best out of him. Because coming into this run as one of your more creative players, as someone who a lot of money was invested in the summer, you look at the league games coming up, Spurs coming up, Celtic coming up. You need players of that calibre to be influential in these games, and I think Barami too often recently hasn't been as influential as he perhaps could be.
Yeah, and I also think him and Hadji were kind of occupying the same, like they both want to come short into that kind of left half space position. Neither of them are players who want to run beyond, so that probably impacted things as well. We'll finish with Sammy saying, Joshua, were you in a cafe on Byres Road on Friday? I think I was, Sammy, but he didn't want to interrupt, which is very polite. I was meeting my grandparents, which was very nice after the Nice game, Chris, so I was skiving, taking some hours back on Friday morning. He also asked, do you think if Shankland came in January, it would make a difference? I think what Rangers need in the attack and third, obviously Shankland's a big talking point at the moment because he's not having a great season for Hearts, but Rangers need legs in that final third, whether it be on either wing, whether it be at fullback. Dujon Sterling, I think at the moment is Rangers' first choice. Right back, if you look at the course of the last week. Yes, Rangers need a goal scorer, even though Shankland's not scored that many goals this season. I don't think it's a silver bullet. They've looked better when they've had Igaman or Danilo, one of those two. I think Lincoln play at the top. I'd like to see Bayrami get a run in there with an actual left winger from the left and Hadji giving you a rotation option. But we've been saying for about a year now, Chris, there's all these caveats of when players are back, and the Rangers need to keep getting results. In the meantime, we'll leave it there. It's going to be a busy week. We're at the B team game tomorrow. We're at, what else, Chris? Kilmarnock this week, isn't it? And then a small matter of an AGM on Thursday. So it's going to be one of your busier weeks of the season. But I could kind of say that most weeks, couldn't I?
Every week is a busy week when you're dealing with Rangers. So plenty on the go. So pressure in B team tomorrow. Ibrox on Wednesday for Kelly, AGM Thursday, back to the training ground on Friday, and then up to Dingwall on Sunday. And then the good news is next week is just really quiet because it's only Spurs in the cup final against Celtic. Yeah. So apart from that, what else is there? What else is there to look forward to? And I see you brought the graphic up. I know you'll give it the bigger sell than me, but if you are looking forward to these, to the AGM, to Kelly, to Ross County, to everything else that's coming up, we're obviously the best place to follow all the news, all the action, all the reaction, all the insight and the analysis. So now is your chance.
No, you've done my job for me, Chris. But people can, if you want, I believe this Black Friday deal ends tomorrow. So if you do want to take advantage of it, then you can do so by clicking on the link in the comments. Year of the Rangers Review for £12. You get an excellent joining gift as well. So thank you if you've taken us up on that offer. We hope that the content is to your liking. We think it will be over the course of the year for that value. But as I say, hurry because that Black Friday deal ends tomorrow. It will be back tomorrow morning. Derek will be back in the hosting chair. You'll be glad to know. Until then, thank you for joining us. We'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.